We've all heard Idaho and Texas complain about Californians moving to their state, raising the price of real estate, voting for liberal policies, and ruining their state. One thing most of those complainers forget is those horrible people from California and other states bring jobs, pay taxes, and put money into the local economy. Well, that's not just happening in Texas and Idaho. Other states, like South Dakota, are getting some of that California action these days too. South Dakota's population grew from 896,000 in July of 2021 to 909,000 in July of 2022. That's according to the U.S. Census Bureau. Birth and death rates were almost even, so 97% of that growth was interstate migration. That's about 14,000 adults who moved to the Mount Rushmore state and did things like have their own opinion, pay taxes, and some purchased real estate. Oh, the humanity! Today we're looking at what percentage of that 14,000 came from which states. Into South Dakota. Got it? Get it? Good. Let's take a look. Number 10, Montana. Montana has no problem keeping its people in the state, and that's probably why only a few people move to South Dakota, the state right next door. Montana's really not a crowded state. They only have a little over 1 million residents. Thing is, when people move there, or were lucky enough to be born there, they tend not to leave. They have only had one census where they actually lost people, and that was during the Hoover administration. Just so you don't have to Google it, that was the 1930s. But the number one reason given for moving from Montana to South Dakota was work. Only 2% of the people that moved to South Dakota in 2022 were from Montana. Number 9, Nebraska. This one totally makes sense, especially if you've ever spent any time in Nebraska. The entirety of Nebraska's northern border is South Dakota. It could be an argument that part of Iowa is part of the northern border too, but not much. I mean, Sioux Falls, Iowa is right there where the three states meet, Iowa, Nebraska, and South Dakota. And that's got a little bit of the northern border. And stop typing. It's actually Sioux City. Sioux Falls is north of Sioux City, but Sioux City is where the three states meet. How many of you did I get? Just write "got me" in the comment section. What's really neat about this part of the country, Sioux Falls is actually where three states meet: Iowa, South Dakota, and Minnesota. I don't know why that's always interested me when states meet, like 3 of them or 4 of them. There's only one place that 4 meet, but it's interesting. The United States map is an amazing thing to study. Anyway, people moving from Nebraska to South Dakota say they're moving for work. Another 2% of the interstate movers to South Dakota came from Nebraska. Number 8, Washington State. This one was a little surprising in the beginning. Most of the people leaving Washington go to Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. South Dakota is actually ranked 12th on states Washington residents move to, so not a lot move there. But when they do move there, they're moving for retirement. It is a lot cheaper to live in South Dakota than Washington State. 3% of the interstate movers to South Dakota came from Washington State in 2022. Number 7, Wyoming. Wyoming and Montana are about the same thing, even though Wyoming has a lot fewer people than Montana. They have 576,000 residents, that's in 2020, and they're the 10th largest state. That makes them 49th when it comes to population density. Alaska is just 1 person for every square mile, I think. Wyoming's a little higher with 5.9 residents for every square mile. The Cowboy State also shares a border with South Dakota. On the east side, takes up about half of their eastern border, and I'm sure Wyoming would take up more of the interstate migration pie if they had more people. They just don't. The number one reason people moved from Wyoming to South Dakota was parole or restraining order. I'm just kidding. It was work. Wyoming accounted for 4% of the people that moved to South Dakota in 2022. Number 6, Illinois. I'm sure the people from South Dakota didn't want to hear this, because whenever you think Illinois, you think Chicago. And when you think of Chicago, you think someone's going to get killed. At least that's what you think if you watch too much cable news. But the main reason given for people from Illinois to move to South Dakota was cost of living. I imagine most of the people that said that are coming from Chicago because Chicago is extremely expensive. Illinois made up 6% of the people moving to South Dakota in 2022. Number 5, North Dakota. This should be no surprise, for a few reasons. Number 1, they're right next to each other. North Dakota is obviously north of South Dakota. It'd be kind of weird if it was south of South Dakota. Maybe do it if you're trying to trick people into not showing up. Kind of like that whole Iceland, Greenland thing. The second reason people moving from North Dakota to South Dakota should be no surprise is, have you ever been to North Dakota? Spend a week there. I guarantee more than once you'll think, God, I hope it's better in South Dakota. Good news, it is. And that's what people listed as why they moved to South Dakota from North Dakota, jobs. Now, if the oil fields are going strong in North Dakota, it's a total different story. They can't get enough workers into that state. But most of the time, and especially lately, they're moving out of state to get jobs. North Dakota supplied 7% of the interstate movers to South Dakota in 2022. Number 4, Iowa. Again, this shouldn't be much of a surprise. It's right next to South Dakota. Iowa's really boring. South Dakota's just sort of boring. The number one reason people from Iowa do move to South Dakota is real estate. Realtors in South Dakota have seen a steady influx of people seeking more affordable housing since the pandemic ended, and a lot of them are heading to South Dakota. The real estate prices are really similar, but the cities is where there's a change. Real estate in towns and cities seem to be a little cheaper in South Dakota. Iowa supplied 9% of the interstate movers to South Dakota in 2022. Number 3, Colorado. Colorado isn't too far away from South Dakota, but in my experience, I've found them to be very similar states, at least the way the people are. Not sure why I always get that feeling. I've been to Colorado a lot more than South Dakota. It's weird. It's just my experience. The number one reason people from Colorado are heading to South Dakota is the cost of living. It is much cheaper in South Dakota than Colorado. The Centennial State is expensive. It's kind of strange for a state that's in the middle of the country to be this expensive, but it is. In housing and just everyday cost of living. That's why people are heading to South Dakota. Colorado supplied 11% of the interstate movers to South Dakota in 2022. Number 2, Minnesota. Even though South Dakota is right next to the land of 10,000 lakes, these are really different states. I mean, their landscapes are very different until you get to winter. Then everything freezes and it seems the same. And yes, if you're not from the United States or don't know about this part of the country, it gets terribly cold in the winters. One lady said it's so cold in Minnesota, you want a chubby spouse to cut down on your heating bill. But the real reason people are moving from Minnesota to South Dakota is the cost of living. Yeah, it's a lot cheaper in South Dakota compared to Minnesota also. Minnesota supplied 19% of the interstate movers to South Dakota in 2022. All right, before we get to number 1, don't forget we have another channel called On This Day. There is a link for that in the description area below. Go on over there, subscribe, watch some videos. All the profits for that go to schools. We donate to classrooms across the country. All right, on to number 1. And number 1, California. If you're in South Dakota right now, you probably already know this. You've seen the license plates going around Fargo. You know Californians have made their way to South Dakota. This isn't new, it's just picked up steam. There's many reasons Californians moved to South Dakota, and most of them have to do with personal finances. Get a cheaper house in South Dakota, like much, much cheaper? Let me just kind of give you an idea. If you go to the typical blue-collar neighborhood in, I don't know, Los Angeles, you'd be lucky to find a home for under $750,000. In South Dakota, it's hard to find homes over $750,000 that don't come with a couple acres. California supplied 33% of the interstate movers to South Dakota in 2022. Congratulations, South Dakota, you now got that California axe to grind too. All right, that's today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you got some information out of it. Now go out, have a great day, and be nice to each other.